I'm very excited to present today's speaker. He's got 20 years experience in software engineering management. He's currently at Intel, and I proudly present the one and only Mr. Chandra.
Good morning. Am I audible?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to talk about writing a test content from an automation-driven perspective, and how do I make an instant automation, and which is fault tolerant, where you can run the automation reliably. So I work in Intel mainly on the system validation side and subsystem validations, where you have systems which is a multidisciplinary product where you have to develop a hardware, software, and validate with the multiple operating systems and deliver the product. So I'm just listing some part of the the validation engineering, where you need to do unit testing, functional validation, subsystem, and the whole pyramid of validation. Use cases, you have hardware firmware interaction and firmware software interaction, and your server client kind of interactions. And you have a different set of validators, right? So developers will do the unit testing mainly, and you have validation engineers who work more onto the exploratory testing and usability testing and security testing and whatnot. And you have other kind of validation folks, which is more of you use a technician to do a push button validation. You have written everything in a script procedural way, and then someone goes through each of the steps and say pass fail, pass fail. So automation, so everybody wants to automate, right? 100%, probably that's a goal. You'll never be able to do it. I was reading last year World Quality Report. The automation percentage is 28%, and it is moving up to say 45%, up to 45% as of last year on some specific industries. But overall, automation itself is low. What the process people will use overall in a complete system in multidisciplinary project. Some team uses agile, some team uses semi-agile, agile, but I use agile, but I don't do this. Then still many people are using classical waterfall method and some bits and pieces. When I say multidisciplinary, you have multiple subsystem. It's not common across one. Each team has varied type of validation and automation. So we are all in software industry, right? So we keep getting new requirements, new changes throughout the project. Something which is a requirement today, tomorrow, your product management team comes and says, no, this is not more required. You need to change. You have to keep changing things. So what do we get in our area where we did a use case on some of this? I get a request, I need a new feature, new SKU, new product. Can we deliver fast? Right? As an engineering team, what do you go through? I am looking at making some architecture change from my previous product to now. So and you get a requirement like this. I need to do fast, agile, and make the changes. So it goes through a process, right? So you need to have an architecture change, and you have to write new test cases. Then after writing the test cases, you will start looking into the configuration in the test bed plan. Then look at, can I automate some of them? and if not, you will start manual validation. Right. So the process part of it, if I map that, every new requirement has to be documented. Then you create the traceability, whatnot, and clone test. You have a previous project, you clone them and you start changing it. Make it for this new project. And scrub for automation, you go one by one test case, start scrubbing, start automating it, and then even the automation you do it in multiple different languages, based on the need. So I got a new requirements. I need to deliver faster with validating them, developing that, and deliver to the market. So what is the expectation from a product management or your senior management? Why can't you do it in agile practice? We know agile practice, a lot of talks yesterday, right? Still many of the people adopting the agile doesn't work fully. And reuse, can I reuse, right? Why can't you reuse from your previous projects? I saw the other team doing something, can I reuse from there? A lot of things goes in. And right, we just heard the previous presentation on stupid metrics. We'll get into the stupid metrics, getting all the data, which is an apple to orange starts. That team has done 3,000 test cases automation, where you're not doing. It starts like that. Collaborate with other teams. Are we not standardize our previous project? It's just incremental, why can't you do it? So what is the reality, right? So people have written test cases for that specific project, written in plain English. Now you clone it, change it, and now you get some customer escapes or customer issues. Okay, I have a coverage issue here. I need to add the coverage to the that test. So where do you add? In the new one, old one? Then you are breaking the system, right? You are going to have a repeated issue coming in new as well, because you have made those changes of the customer issues from a previous product in a different data. So I can't reuse or collaborate from the other teams because they have used a different, type of script, different devices to automate. I can't do it. So that's what happens in reality. And if they start doing it, they spend a lot of time, and after that, no, that's not good. It's not working for me. So both, even the test case I can't reuse and the test automation I can't reuse, because both are depending on which subsystem and do we have a unified process. In a nutshell, I'm summarizing the challenges. Requirement changes, validation time gets crunched because development takes more time to fix the issues or develop it and do their unit testing. Then you're already in a crunch time. But you cannot go to the management every time and say, they have crunched my time, I need extra time to deliver. Right? It doesn't work most of the time. So how do you, then what do? You start the other segments of issues in the multidisciplinary project. Every piece is changing. Your hardware is changing, your firmware is changing, softwares are changing, the drivers are changing, and you are getting new operating system changing, which is not released to market. You need to integrate with that and test. So there are a lot of variables here. So what happens when you get into that pressure, and what do you do to deliver? Right? You start updating multiple places, extra effort to keep the integrity. You cannot keep the integrity between your customer issues happened in the previous product to the current one, and your automation readiness goes behind because you have to write the test case, then you start scrubbing it, then you write the automation. Once the automation is ready, you already might have crossed 50% of your life cycle. So what do you do on the other aspects of it? So you start trading off between your coverage versus time. I have only limited time. I need to do manual because I can't automate. I don't have time to automate. Even if I automate, the reliability of that false positive, false negatives. The impact is customer escapes. So what is required? Yes, I need an agile system and standardized test and the automation under single umbrella. Probably for a team or probably for an organization, if organization works on multiple different projects of similar nature. Each team might be doing the same thing. So what is needed? Can I change test content quick and easy with known impact attributes? Do I know by putting a query like a SQL query, and I know if this changes, these are the impact. Can I write my test cases in an attributed manner so that I know I'm ready for the changes, right? I can figure out if this requirement changes, I have all the traceability to figure out what needs to be changed. Can I write my test content thinking it is automatable? So in the classical method, we write our test case and then we start scrubbing and can automate, right? So can I think it is automatable and write it? If I'm not able to automate, it's okay. Still, you are written thinking it is automatable. Some other day you can automate. Every automation suite is also evolving, right? Something you cannot automate yesterday, you can automate now with the tools availability and a solutioning happening on each of the area. If I modify my test content, test content is my input based on the requirement changes or whatever. So can I keep my automation in sync whenever I make a change in the test content? So otherwise you have two pieces. You have source code of the automation, you have test content written in some test case management system. Generally most of the big companies use the test case management system. Some of them still might be using Excel, but many are moved. So if I write my test content, can I get an instant automation some way for all available solution on the automation, which can be ready to deploy for testing? So we passed through all these issues and looked at how do I work on all these issues and come up with something which is useful for me to reduce the pressure on the team and also make my automation reliable and my test content reusable across my projects and can be beyond that. The focus area was maximize reuse of test content and the scripts, whatever we write the script to reuse across. Dynamic automation suite deployment for varied test levels. So my test strategy changes. My requirement of testing changes because when in the life cycle of the product, the issues what you saw today may not be the issues later. So there is not a lot of non-yielding test cases. You will keep running them for the regression perspective, but it may not yield anything. The end result is you are not utilizing your hardware software infrastructure completely effectively. So automation reliability for long duration tests. Yes, I automated the test. I have 100 tests automated. I am running it nightly. My second test case runs. You get a BSOD. You got a system failure or a system crash. You come back tomorrow morning. You see the automation is not running. So you already wasted the time. Again, you need to start running them. So it doesn't work out in, if you have long duration test, you want to run it in automated way. If it is not reliable, it is taken care of recovery mechanism. So maximum test bed utilization for continuous delivery, where can you think of putting a pool of systems where whenever a new check-in happens, new source code check-in happens, you run your automation as a continuous integration, and you are having a pool to have maximized time utilization. It looks into whichever is free and runs on that and comes back. And building the redundancy. How thought of putting a unified test and meta methods. Whenever you write a test case, you look at it is automatable. If you are looking into the automation, then it goes into a method and parameters, right? So whenever you write automation, you write your script with the functions. So look at like you developing you are a developer, not a automation script person or a validation person. How do we write the development code? You write your header files, your definition of the function, and then you implement those functions, and then you call them in the main in a sequence, right? That's your scenario. So can I write my test case in a similar manner? Forget about automation. I am not focused on the automation yet. I don't know whether it is automatable or not. Still, I write it in a method and a parameter. However, when you write the method and the parameter, still it should be readable like you are plain English, right? The way you write earlier and now should not be too much of a difference from a behavioral perspective, or when you look at which I can use it for a manual execution as well. So instant automation I already talked about. The moment you write a test case, can I get the changes related to those methods and parameters in case your requirement changes, or some of the step is not applicable because that requirement is no more a requirement now. Can that get triggered in your automation script as well, and you have a new package of the automation which based on what is changed in your test content. Fault tolerant, the environment recovery which I talked about, and the standardization of the test. I'll go through what we did on these 4 areas. How do you create an unified test or unification of the test? So if you use a test case management system, yes, it has a lot of attributes you can create. Can you standardize that for your organization or for your team, and add little more into that, where you can write a single test across similar platforms or the programs, and wherever is applicable you tag them. So now I am trying to create a database out of this with more attributes, where it is going to be easy for me to create your indicators, reports, changes, the impacts as a reliable indicators against your stupid metrics. Otherwise, you'll go into the stupid metrics. Program segment is some of the fields which I called out here, and the tool chains. You do the automation, or you use a semi-automation when what you run in the manual, but still you use some of the performance tools or things like that. That's a tool chain. And can you put the inventory as well tagged here, where your hardware requirements to run this test is also been tagged as an attribute here. And traceability, of course, on the requirement and the functions. So the idea here is you write test cases for your specific subsystem, but if I just extend this with more of the additional charters as function, it can be reusable for across the org. So most of the subsystem test cases goes into the system test case. If you should take the pyramid of validation, it is a combination of your functions called in a different use cases that makes your system test cases mostly, other than a usability test cases or UCD test cases. Continuing on that, this is an example, how we wrote your test content in the method and the parameter. If you see this, so I'll just take some of the boot to OS. It looks like a plain English, right? So in the background, this is the method and the parameter, and you have a mechanism with a regular expression to parse that from your test content and create your automation, and also check whether the test content what you written is adhering to some standard which relies on the automation. So and it also makes the writing of the test content unified, so that whenever you write, it is in a similar behavioral. So how did we do that? We decomposed our test cases in one of the specific firmware subsystem. We had totally 3,000 test cases, and we started decomposing what it consists of. Similar to what you write in when you write your automation script, you start creating your libraries, functions, and then calling them, right? So we just applied that same methodology while you write your test case itself. Guess what? We have 3,000 test cases turned into just 200 methods. So now I focus on automating those 200 methods rather than going through every test case, start automating it, then you do the code reuse, you go between your files to figure out where is the equivalent code here. So that is the concept behind this. And as a behavior driven, people use Gherkin. This is similar to the Gherkin or the extension of that. I don't put any prerequisite somewhere else. Every prerequisite goes part of your test case, right? It's like a step and action, and the expected result is like a given when then. The then part is expected result. So how do I get instant automation when I write my test content? So now I decompose my test cases into methods and parameter. I focused on implementing automation for that method and parameter. However, the parameter part can be a dynamic. So I write my code generation happens as a template, class template. So when you use those parameters differently in your test case, it generates the code equivalent of that dynamically, so whenever you need it. So in that way, it's a code template and the code generation. So code generation happens on the fly, and your template class, that's what you return, which is specific to a specific functionality. And in your code, you might be using different tools, right? As my subsystem, I may be using some of the tools, and the other equivalent, mobile hardware, they are using a little different tool. How do I make sure it is reusable across? So that's where I'll get into a pluggable tool chain. My framework, my class template remains same, but a little different calling of the tool, can be a parameter itself, which can vary between teams. So that's where you have a pluggable tool chain, and you have a pluggable hardwares, which is you might be using a hardware devices. Specifically in my case, we basically test the laptops and desktops kind of a thing. So the once you close your laptop lid, system will go to a sleep, and open it, it comes back. Multiple different way of taking the system back to from the sleep. So those are places you might be using a shorting the relay or shorting the signal to get your automation done. So it is having that kind of a compatibility here, where you can use the hardware plug and play, and each team might be using a different one, but your method remains same, and it is more of an on and off, and your method is same, and the pluggable tool chain takes care of how that is to be automated. Then you have a script. When you run your automation, you may generate a lot of logs. Can I vary my log levels depending on it is a fail versus pass, depending on it is a catastrophic failure versus a regular pass. If I put a lot of logs, it may take more time to execute. It's good to collect a lot of data, but however, time in mind, when should I run with highest log level versus only the critical errors. A little architecture around that. I will not go in detail of this. So whenever I create a method in the parameter, the mechanism we used is the regular expression to parse and parse each of the tests in your test case management system and correlate to your already implemented regular expressions and generate your code accordingly. A sample code generated here, and if I update my test case with any of the new parameters, then you can dynamically generate the code like this. So this is the other part related to fault tolerance. Generally in a system like what we test, your OS is operating system is new. It may have multiple issues related to blue screen because it's getting developed, right? And your firmware is getting developed, your driver is getting developed, your software is getting developed. So if I get into that nightly execution, how do I recover my system? This is one piece of a module which we developed. It goes through a rule engine. In every test case, if I take an analogy of writing a piece of code with you have init, try, catch, and finally, can I put the same concept to your test content? And in each of your every test case, you might be having a recovery mechanism in case it goes into any of these catastrophic failure. You can have a suite where you have a global recovery mechanism and you have a local recovery mechanism. Some of the cases I may be just restarting my system and I can continue my test. If not, I may have to do the second, use the telemetry data which you are getting a core dump or a complete log on the system and then analyze that and take the action. Or you may install a complete new OS, new firmware, then start from there to continue the rest of the test cases. I know this test case is failed. I am collecting all the information to reproduce. But however, I don't want to stop. I want to continue the rest of the test so that in the interest of time, I can complete my rest of the execution specific to rest of the use cases. This is a snapshot of a continuous delivery system where you have a check-in, and then your build server triggers that check-in to build the new code, new binaries, and then run them through this framework where you have a unified test control, where this is where you have a test content method watching your test content in your test case management system and connects to the other side to your source code and the scripting automation scripts, pulls the data, generates your new package based on what has been changed, and runs them in the system under test in a pool of system depending on the load balancing part of it, and you get the results. In between you have a host system. I don't run all of my tests into my system under test all together. I run one by one and collect all my results and then push the next script to the system under test and run them. Reason is you don't know when it is going to crash. This is like a patient. So I don't want to sit on that and collect my results. So that's where I can do a better recovery through hardware mechanism or the software mechanism, because I have a host controller mechanism even for my testing. The benefit what we got after we doing this, we had a lot of issues, and the reuse from one program to other program, we never know. If anybody management comes and asks, it is a wild guess, okay, 60% reuse, 70% reuse. If I get into the next level data, it is hard to figure it out, because we compare between a short description of the test versus the complete test. We cannot do. So it's a lot of work to even figure out those kind of data. After implementing this, we implemented for 5 programs. These are the real programs. I just taken out the name for a reason. So that is the reuse metrics which we see now after implementing this. And if I double click on that, I can go to the every last level of the data, from where it has been reused, where it is developed versus where it is reused, right? And this graph shows my test case versus my methods. I just need to focus on implementing automation for 10% of the overall test case. That's where it results into my automation. If I do that, it results into 100% automation. I may not be able to do it, right? In reality, I may focusing on 50% of this, not even that. So the myth of spending a lot of time in the automation and then you are not able to get that running, versus how do I get into this kind of a method where I can focus dedicatedly on the automation. I am not bothered about how my test content is changing, how the scenarios are changing, how are they packaging it. Still my automation works if they make the changes. And writing test cases and automating may be different people. It may not be the same person who doing all that. So how do I bridge those communication through the tool? Yeah, I'm almost done. So extending the methodology, if I put this into the bigger organizations, corporates, where if I have one unified test library across the organization, I can pull the methods and functions and get that running in my test cases. Even my writing the test case becomes easy in most of the time, and it can result into like a org-wide forum to moderate those test content reuse and standardization. Most of the places, some of them may be specific test cases which cannot go into that. It's okay. Even 40%, 50% reuse is a great at org level. So I can generate the dynamic test content through the wizard. I have a method and the parameter now. Now it is creating your combination of the test. I can put lot of mathematical equations to create that and see whether it is making more coverage, a right coverage, or you can work out a lot of things because you have those attributes in a kind of a database. Traceability, code function to test methods, impact based testing. If I put a test method and the parameter linked to your development code, you have a functions and methods there itself, and you have a chain traceability in your code. If I connect these two together and using any source code management, you know what is the change list, change set happening from one build to other. Can I get an impact based equivalent test or equivalent functionality from that? You can use the code coverage tool and things like that, but that is after fact, right? When you run, you get the code coverage. But this can give you a real impact based testing test cases which you can pick up confidently. And it's a virtual team to write the test script automation. If you have the standardization and the moderation, then everybody else can contribute like any of the open source contribution similar to that in an argwide. Summary, unified test, you can have lot of productivity improvement or effectiveness. No duplicate test, you have a method to figure out a duplicate test, because if any of those combination of your methods and parameter repeats in multiple tests, here you can bring them up now. Automation can be faster. You have no coverage compromise. You can write the test cases faster because you have a lot of reuse, which is a reliable reuse. Then, of course, you can get a lot of telemetry data and indicators on the reuse, a real reuse indicators you can get it. So I'm done. Questions?
This is an impressive and it's a sophisticated system. Do you have a centralized, dedicated team that's developed this?
We started with a small team, and then now it is getting proliferated to multiple teams across. And we started converting the existing test cases written in their own plain English to this. And we found when we made those changes, I no need to add most of the time a new script. I no need to add a new method as well. So it is started like that. We don't have a big dedicated team. We have around 10 members team. Now it's contributing to multiple subsystems in my organization. They are developers.
Definitely a neat concept. What are some of the tools you are using to accomplish this?
We looked at more into the platform agnostic. So we created our own tool to bring all this traceability together. And the other side, we started writing our automation script in the Python so that it can go into multiple platforms and OSs independently. And specific to UI related automation things, like we started using Selenium.
So for system level testing, so how do you use for example, this is the one system level testing, the new system also like coming in. So how percentage you can use the system level process? The system A and B can be quite different. So how do you say reuse the high percent of level A system, B system?
If I take a particular example, right, your phone systems, our laptops, our desktops. So all different variants, right? But most of them goes into our standby mode. I'm just giving one example. So many of them are like, reusable in a similar manner, but some of them not. So that becomes an outlier. But at least you have a maximized a reuse and the collaboration on a specific area. Even that's where I'm going. If it's a multiple different products, uh, even 30, 40, 50% reuse is great.
I have a question. One of your slides on automation driven test funding, there's a bullet point on automation failover and anticipation. I don't know if you may have talked about it.
Okay, good question. I did not focus more on that. So automation driven test content. Whenever you write your test case is nothing but multiple steps in it, right? Each of the steps you think it is automatable. Okay, I have a method and I have a parameter. You don't know how to automate at that time. You write like that. So don't bother about the automation, but still you think it can be automated. Write it that way. That's what the automation driven. When you write like that, your step and action, your prerequisites all goes into your test steps. So that's what I meant by automation driven. Suppose your automation fails. So I have written my automation, the way I have written my test cases thinking it can be automated, and I have automated now. My whole automation breaks for some reason. Can I fail over to manual validation without having lot of knowledge on the automation? So generally a technician, right, does the push button execution. Can I write my test cases? Still it is a method and the parameter, but how does it look like in the back? If I go, if you go back here, it still looks like your plain English. This is the way I am parsing it in the background. Here it looks like, connect DC, boot to OS, set BIOS, read BIOS, right? It still can be manageable by a technician or a less skilled person who can execute them. So that's what I meant failover. Any other questions?
You mentioned prerequisites. Aren't those another way of explaining that would let the system start state?
Yes.
And you would include those as test steps, but at the beginning of your test case.
Correct. Correct. So even if you go to the Gherkin language, you will say given, when, then, right? Some of the given part goes into your prerequisite. So equivalent of that. So if I use just the Gherkin, so when I write like that, getting those passed and converting to method was difficult. That's where we evaluate the Gherkin and gone a little bit ahead of that on the other side.
Any more questions?
Thank you.